When people today hear -30 degrees, their first reaction is shock. They imagine malfunctioning heaters, frozen pipes, emergency warnings, and power failures. They imagine conditions that require immediate evacuation or outside assistance. In the modern world, temperatures like this are treated as crises, temporary states that normal life cannot continue within. But for many Native American communities of the Northern Plains, -30 degrees Celsius was not a crisis. It was winter. It was expected. It arrived every year, sometimes earlier than planned, sometimes later, but never as a surprise. Entire generations were born, raised, and grew old in climates where extreme cold was a normal background condition of life. Children learned to walk in it. Elders told stories through it. Daily routines continued despite it. This difference in mindset is critical. Native Americans did not design shelters to handle emergencies. They designed shelters to exist comfortably within long periods of cold. That distinction changes everything. When cold is rare, shelters are temporary solutions. When cold is constant, shelters become systems. The teepee was not designed to keep winter out. It was designed to make winter livable. Modern descriptions often label teepees as portable tents. This language is misleading. Portability does not mean fragility. Temporary does not mean weak. The teepee was a seasonal structure, not a disposable one. It was expected to stand through weeks of snow, high winds, and severe temperature swings. It was taken down not because it failed, but because movement was part of life. When reassembled, it returned to full strength. In fact, the ability to disassemble and rebuild a shelter was a survival advantage. In extreme cold, fixed structures crack. Rigid materials fail suddenly. The teepee avoided this problem entirely. Its components could be inspected constantly. Poles could be replaced one at a time. Hides could be patched immediately. There was no single point of failure. If part of a modern shelter fails in -30 degrees Celsius, the entire structure often becomes unsafe. If part of a teepee failed, it was repaired before it became dangerous. This is not primitive design. It is resilient design. Many people assume warmth comes from thickness. Thicker walls, heavier materials, more insulation. But in extreme cold, shape often matters more than material. The conical shape of the teepee was not aesthetic tradition. It was an understanding of how heat behaves. Warm air rises, but where it goes after rising determines whether it escapes or stays useful. Flat ceilings trap heat unevenly. Corners create cold pockets. Vertical walls invite wind pressure. A cone eliminates corners entirely. As warm air rose inside the teepee, it moved upward smoothly, following the slope of the walls instead of collecting uselessly near the ceiling. This allowed heat to circulate downward along the interior surface, warming the living space instead of escaping immediately. At the same time, the steep exterior slope forced wind to move around the structure instead of into it. Wind did not strike the teepee. It flowed past it. This reduced both heat loss and structural stress. The teepee was not trying to overpower winter. It was trying to avoid fighting it at all. Temperature alone rarely kills. Wind does. At -30 degrees Celsius, exposed skin can freeze in minutes when wind is present. Wind strips heat faster than the body can produce it. Even a well-insulated shelter becomes ineffective if wind can penetrate or press against it continuously. Native Americans understood this deeply. The teepee's curved surface and flexible structure allowed it to absorb wind energy instead of resisting it. Poles bent slightly. Hides flexed. Stress distributed evenly across the frame. A rigid wall cracks. A flexible wall survives. This is why teepees could endure storms that would collapse stiffer structures. Animal hides were not used because nothing else was available. They were used because they worked. Properly prepared hides block wind, resist moisture, and retain heat while remaining breathable. Unlike modern synthetic materials, hides adjust to temperature and humidity naturally. In winter, hides stiffen slightly, increasing their wind resistance. When snow accumulated against them, the hide did not collapse. It accepted the weight and became part of the insulation system. Layering mattered. Seam placement mattered. Maintenance mattered. Every detail reflected experience. Modern instinct says, remove snow. Traditional knowledge often says, observe first. Snow traps air. Trapped air insulates. As snow built up around the base of a teepee, it reduced drafts and stabilized internal temperatures. The shelter became quieter, warmer, and more stable. Snow was not ignored. It was used. Fire inside a teepee served several functions simultaneously. Yes, it produced warmth. But more importantly, it controlled moisture. In extreme cold, moisture is deadly. Wet clothing freezes. Condensation turns into ice. Ice drains heat. A small, steady fire dried the air, prevented condensation, and stabilized internal conditions. The goal was not to create a hot space. Overheating caused sweat, which could be fatal later. Fire was managed with discipline, not comfort. The smoke flaps at the top of the teepee were adjustable for a reason. They created controlled airflow. Cold air entered low. Warm air exited high. This constant movement prevented suffocation and moisture buildup without stripping heat too quickly. It was a delicate balance refined through generations. No modern ventilation system could outperform it in simplicity. A shelter alone does not keep people alive. Behavior does. Inside the teepee, movement was slow and deliberate. People avoided unnecessary activity. Heat was conserved by posture, position, and routine. Sleeping positions were chosen carefully. Clothing was adjusted constantly. Sweat was avoided at all costs. Survival depended on discipline. The teepee was not a tent. It was architecture, climate control, social structure, survival knowledge. Every part supported the others. Remove one element, discipline, materials, airflow, fire control, and the system fails. Together, they made life possible at -30 degrees Celsius. In extreme cold, sleep is not rest. It is survival. At -30 degrees Celsius, the human body loses heat continuously, even while motionless. Sleep becomes dangerous if warmth is not managed deliberately. Native Americans understood this and treated sleeping arrangements as carefully as food storage or shelter construction. Inside the teepee, sleeping positions were never random. People slept close to the ground where warm air settled. Bedding was layered deliberately, hides, grasses, additional hides. Each layer trapped air, and trapped air slowed heat loss. The frozen ground beneath was insulated from the body as thoroughly as possible. Children and elders were placed in the warmest areas, usually farthest from drafts and closest to shared body heat. Sleeping close together was not merely cultural closeness, it was thermal strategy. Even during sleep, awareness mattered. Clothing was adjusted before resting. Too much warmth caused sweating. Too little allowed dangerous heat loss. Balance was everything. Night was endured through knowledge, not comfort. Modern thinking separates indoor and outdoor clothing. That separation did not exist at -30 degrees Celsius. Inside the teepee, people remained clothed, but strategically so. Layers were worn, removed, and adjusted throughout the day. Clothing was a temperature regulator, not a fixed state. Animal hides breathed. They allowed moisture to escape slowly while retaining heat. Fur direction mattered. In colder conditions, fur faced inward. In damp conditions, it faced outward. Nothing about clothing was accidental. The worst mistake in extreme cold is sweating. Sweat freezes. Frozen moisture pulls heat from the body faster than bare skin. Native Americans avoided overheating as carefully as they avoided freezing. Comfort was not the goal. Stability was. In extreme environments, routine is safety. Every winter day followed a predictable rhythm. Fires were tended at specific times. Meals were shared at set intervals. Tasks were performed slowly and deliberately. Routine removed decision fatigue. When cold weakens the body, poor decisions become more likely. Routine ensured that critical actions, tending fire, repairing hides, checking airflow, were never forgotten. Even children learned the rhythm early. Winter was not chaotic. It was structured. Structure kept people alive. Energy is heat. Every unnecessary movement costs warmth. Native Americans understood this instinctively. Inside the teepee, movement was slow, economical, and purposeful. People did not pace. They did not fidget. They did not rush. Tasks were planned so that multiple actions could be completed in one movement. Tools were kept within reach. Firewood was stored carefully to reduce exposure. Outside the teepee, time was limited. Inside, stillness preserved energy. The teepee was designed to support this behavior. Its compact space reduced the need to move at all. At -30°C, waiting for something to break is fatal. Teepees were inspected constantly. Small tears in hides were patched immediately. Loose seams were tightened. Poles were adjusted before stress caused fractures. This constant maintenance prevented catastrophic failure. Modern shelters often fail suddenly. A zipper breaks. A seam tears. A pole snaps. In extreme cold, these failures escalate quickly. The teepee avoided this by allowing gradual repair. Every problem could be addressed while still small. Fire does not exist without fuel. Firewood was gathered and stored long before deep winter arrived. Dry wood was protected from snow and moisture. Different wood types were used for different purposes. Fast ignition versus slow burn. Fuel was rationed carefully. Fire was never allowed to consume more than necessary. A steady, low flame was preferred over a large blaze. This conserved wood and reduced smoke. Fire management was discipline, not indulgence. A teepee was not just a physical structure. It was a social one. Decisions were shared. Resources were distributed intentionally. No one survived winter alone. The group ensured that no individual wasted energy unnecessarily. Children were guided. Elders advised. Tasks were divided according to ability, not status. Community reduced risk. Isolation increased it. Mobility did not weaken survival, it strengthened it. If conditions changed, teepees could be relocated. If wind patterns shifted, shelters could be reoriented. If resources depleted, communities could move. This flexibility prevented entrapment. Permanent structures locked people into bad conditions. Teepees allowed response. Adaptation mattered more than permanence. Modern observers often judge shelters by thickness and technology. They ask, how warm is it? How strong is it? How insulated is it? Native Americans asked different questions. How stable is it? How reparable is it? How adaptable is it? The teepee answered those questions perfectly. It was not primitive. It was precise. Living in a teepee at -30°C was not about toughness. It was about understanding systems, heat behavior, wind movement, moisture control, human limits, community discipline. The teepee was not a miracle. It was knowledge made visible. In a world that increasingly relies on fragile systems, this knowledge feels more relevant than ever. Survival was never about defeating winter. It was about living intelligently within it.